It was an early morning when a letter arrived at the White House, an unexpected piece of correspondence that piqued President Donald Trump's curiosity. It wasn't an email or a formal invitation. It was handwritten, simple, and direct. The letter came from a man named Ethan Hayes, a farmer from the Midwest whose family had worked the same plot of land for over a century. Ethan didn't mince words in his letter, explaining the dire straits he was in. The pressures from corporate farming giants and the soaring costs of running a small farm were suffocating his family's livelihood. To everyone's surprise, Trump decided to take the letter seriously. He didn't just send a reply or delegate the issue to one of his advisors. He made the rare decision to visit. As the motorcade arrived at the sprawling farm, the atmosphere felt strangely different from the usual political settings Trump was accustomed to. The air was thick with uncertainty and quiet desperation. Ethan, a man whose hands had seen years of hard labor, was there to greet him. "Mr. President, I appreciate you making the trip, but I won't pretend that things are fine. We're losing everything." Trump stepped out of the car, surveying the land. His usual bravado was replaced with a rare pause of reflection. "I've heard the complaints, but it's not just a matter of prices. The whole system is complicated, Ethan." Ethan didn't back down. "Complicated? My family's been on this land for generations, and now we're barely holding on. Big corporations buy up the land, and we can't compete with their prices. How is that fair?" Trump, a businessman at his core, couldn't deny the validity of Ethan's words. "I understand competition, Ethan, but sometimes competition is what drives the economy." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "There's a difference between competition and destruction. I'm not asking for a bailout. I'm asking for fairness." The air between them was tense, and Trump's security detail observed closely, unsure whether things would take a more heated turn. But before it could escalate, Ethan's wife, Sarah, appeared at the door with a warm smile, cutting through the intensity. "Let's head inside, Mr. President. You've seen the land. Now let's share a meal." Inside the modest home, Sarah served a home-cooked dinner, and Trump sat down, staring at the humble spread. "This is good," he said, taking a bite of cornbread, but Ethan wasn't impressed by the compliment. "We sell that at the market, but it doesn't cover our expenses," Ethan said, leaning forward. "This isn't about good food. It's about survival. We're being crushed by big corporations." Trump, for once, sat back, his hands folded. "So, what exactly do you want me to do about it?" Ethan's voice was firm, but not angry. "We need policies that help us, not just the big guys. We need tax breaks, better access to equipment, and protections against unfair trade deals. We need the playing field leveled." Sarah chimed in from across the table, her voice softer, but no less determined. "Farming isn't just a business to us, Mr. President. It's who we are. It's what we pass down to our children." Trump looked around the room, at the worn-out furniture and family photos on the wall. It was clear that this wasn't just a political issue, it was a personal one for the Hayes family. He hadn't expected to find a moment of introspection here, on a small farm in the middle of nowhere, but the seriousness in Ethan's eyes forced him to reconsider. "I've seen what you're dealing with. I can't pretend to know everything, but I'll listen. We'll find a way to make this work," Trump said, standing up from the table. Ethan didn't seem convinced. "Listening's not enough. We need action." Later, as they walked back outside, Trump's gaze was fixed on the land. The fields stretched out before him like an endless sea of green, but to Ethan, it represented the struggle of a lifetime. It was a battle for his family's future. Trump nodded, understanding the weight of what Ethan was asking. "Show me what you do here," Trump said, surprising both Ethan and himself. Ethan led Trump to an old tractor, the kind that had been passed down through generations, and handed him the keys. "This is what feeds this country, and it's getting harder every day." Trump hesitated, then climbed onto the tractor. As the engine roared to life, he guided the machine through the rows of crops. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't smooth. He had no idea what he was doing, but he could feel the raw weight of responsibility that came with working this land. "This isn't just a business for you, is it?" Trump said, his voice quieter now. Ethan's answer was simple. "No, Mr. President. This is our life." The two men spent hours talking. Ethan didn't hold back, telling Trump about the struggles of small farmers across the nation. Trump listened, really listened, more intently than he had at any campaign rally or press conference. When the day was done, he shook Ethan's hand, promising that he would do something to help. 2 weeks later, as Ethan repaired a fence on his farm, his phone rang. It was Trump. "Ethan," Trump's voice came through the receiver. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. We're moving forward with a plan. Things are going to change." Ethan's heart raced. Was it true? Could Trump really make a difference? A month later, the news hit the airwaves. President Trump has signed a new executive order to protect small farmers from unfair corporate practices. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. For the first time in years, small farmers had been heard. And it all started with one conversation. A conversation that was never meant to be a photo op or a campaign stunt, but a real chance to change things. Soon after, Trump arrived back at the Hayes farm, unannounced, his presence more of a symbol than a political gesture. Ethan greeted him at the door. "You really did it," Ethan said, astonished. Trump smiled. "We're not done yet, Ethan, but I'm just getting started." And from that moment forward, the battle for fair farming had a champion who listened, understood, and acted. The Hayes family was just one family, but their struggle had sparked something much bigger. And for the first time, it seemed like things were finally starting to change. A few months passed, and the changes were beginning to be felt across the nation. Small farms like the Hayeses were slowly but surely seeing some relief. The new policies President Trump had signed into action started to level the playing field. Tax breaks for small farmers were being implemented, equipment access had improved, and most importantly, unfair trade practices were being scrutinized and addressed. Ethan walked through the fields one chilly morning, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. He had never imagined this moment. His family's farm, once on the brink of collapse, was now on its way to a stable future, thanks to the unexpected intervention of a president who had listened to him. As he walked, his phone rang. It was a familiar number, Trump's office. Ethan paused, his heart skipping a beat. It had been a while since they had spoken, and he wondered what was next. "Ethan," Trump's voice came through the line. "How's the farm?" Ethan smiled. "Better. Much better. The changes are working. The land's breathing again." "I'm glad to hear it," Trump replied. "But listen, I think we need to take it a step further. You're not alone in this fight. There are more farmers out there who need help. What if we made it a national initiative? What if we brought together small farmers from across the country and gave them a platform to speak directly to Washington?" Ethan felt a rush of emotions. "You mean a summit?" "Exactly. A gathering where small farmers can share their stories, their struggles, and their solutions. It's time to put the spotlight on them and show that we stand behind them." Ethan leaned against the old oak tree that had stood on his farm for generations. The weight of the moment hit him. "Mr. President, that's a big step, but it could make all the difference." "I know it's big, Ethan, but it's time to do something bold. If it works for you, we'll bring it to the national stage. It's your call. You're the one who started all this." Ethan took a deep breath, looking out at his fields one last time before making his decision. He knew this was more than just about his family's farm now. It was about the future of farming in America. "I'm in," he said, a firm resolve in his voice. "Let's do it." A few months later, Washington, D.C. was buzzing with anticipation. The National Small Farmers Summit was about to begin. The event, A collaboration between the White House and small farming communities was taking place on the Capitol steps, bringing together farmers from every corner of the nation. Ethan stood at the podium, surrounded by a sea of faces, farmers, politicians, and press from all over. It was surreal. A man from a small farm in the Midwest, standing in front of the world, fighting for the future of agriculture. Trump stood beside him, looking on with pride as Ethan took the microphone. "This isn't just about policies," Ethan began, his voice steady. "This is about preserving our way of life. This is about families, communities, and the land that has fed generations. We've fought for so long, and now we have a chance to make sure that future generations of farmers don't have to fight the same battles we did." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. For a moment, Ethan could see the country coming together. He could feel the shift, not just in the policies, but in the collective spirit of the people. "I'm standing here today because we made a change that started with one conversation, one visit, and one promise to make things right," Ethan continued, looking directly at Trump. "And now, we can make that promise a reality for farmers all across this country." The crowd erupted into applause. For the first time in a long while, it felt like the underdogs had finally found their voice, and it was being heard. The summit turned into a turning point for farming in America. It wasn't just about legislation or politics anymore. It was about community, resilience, and the power of standing up for what was right. Small farmers, who had once been forgotten in the backyards of cities and towns, were now on the front lines of a revolution. And for Ethan Hayes, it wasn't just about the victory, it was about the knowledge that his family's farm, and the farms of thousands like it, had a future. It was about the satisfaction of knowing that, when all seemed lost, one voice had sparked a movement. From that moment on, Ethan and Sarah continued their work on the farm, now with renewed hope and purpose. And while the challenges of farming were never completely gone, they had made a difference, a real, lasting difference that would shape the future of agriculture for generations to come. And as for Trump, he kept his word. The summit was just the beginning of a new era for small farmers. It was a chapter in a story that would be remembered long after Ethan and the other farmers were gone. Proof that sometimes, even the most unexpected alliances can change the world. The years passed, and while the landscape of American farming began to shift, the challenges remained. Climate change, rising fuel costs, and corporate pressure kept the fight for fair farming ongoing. But the Hayeses, along with other small farmers, were no longer alone. Their voices were heard in the halls of government, and while progress had been made, they knew the battle was far from over. One afternoon, as Ethan prepared for a meeting, he received an unexpected call. "Ethan, it's Donald Trump," came the voice. "I've been thinking about what we started. There's more to do, and I want you to help me finish it." Ethan was stunned. "I'm listening. We have a chance to make bigger changes. New trade agreements, funding for small farmers, sustainability," Trump said. "I want you to lead this initiative." "I'll do it," Ethan replied, his resolve firm. And so, Ethan Hayes became the face of a new push for small farming in America. Over the years, small farmers gained traction through legislation and global partnerships. But the fight never ended. The Hayeses, along with others, pressed on, now knowing they were part of a larger movement. One evening, sitting on his porch, Ethan reflected on how far they'd come. It all started with a single letter, and that letter had sparked monumental change. Ethan was no longer just a farmer. He was a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up for what you believe in. As the stars twinkled above, Ethan felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The future of farming had been rewritten, and it had been rewritten by people like him. The fight wasn't over, but there was hope now, a hope that things could be different. And that hope was what kept him going. What kept all of them going? What about you? What do you believe is worth fighting for? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going and stand together for a better future.